All right, as many of you know, the Africa Center has been tracking the security challenges in northern Mali and the Sahel for the last several years through our publications and via our programs. And in this way, we've attempted to try to better understand and capture the complexity of the security challenges in this region, which are often multi-layered. This roundtable this morning is a continuation of that process, where we're going to attempt to assess the situation on the ground today with the name of looking forward for where things are going from here. And we've organized two panels to do this. The first panel, which is here before us, is focused on identifying the actors and the drivers of the instability in northern Mali. And this is a particularly important task in this context because there's a great deal of ambiguity about what's going on in northern Mali. The situation is very fluid, but especially since the last few years, this region has been highly inaccessible. And so relatively few people have a real good handle on the actors, their motivations, their agendas, and the local grievances that are driving the instability in this region. By spending time really trying to understand that facet of the challenge, we're in a better position to talk about the stabilization strategies that may be appropriate for this context. And that's the focus of the second panel, which will try to draw on past experience in Mali, as well as looking at experiences from other stabilization operations in Africa and around the world to try to interject into our thinking about the situation in Mali, and in that way provide some guidance to policymakers in Mali, the region, and internationally as they try to engage this context in a way that will contribute to sustained stability for the region. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to my colleague and the chair of the Africa Center's program on transnational threats and counterterrorism programs. So, Mr. Ben Nichols, or Dr. Ben Nichols.
Thanks, Dr. Joe. My name is Ben Nichols, and I'm the academic chair for transnational threats and counterterrorism at the Africa Center, and it's my pleasure to serve as the moderator for this first panel this morning. As Dr. Joe mentioned, this panel looks at the forces of instability in northern Mali, and we are fortunate to have three distinguished speakers to help us with this task. The biographies for all of today's speakers are available. I think you have handouts, but I'll just highlight a few points. We'll begin with Djallil Lounnas. Dr. Lounnas is assistant professor at Akhawayn University in Ifrane, Morocco, and associate researcher at the Center for International Peace and Security Studies at L'Université de Montréal in Canada. He is a specialist in Al-Qaeda in the Islamic Maghreb, AQIM, and he has conducted field research in Mali, Mauritania, and Algeria, including interviews with former jihadis. Dr. Lounnas is widely published and has held several teaching positions since completing his doctorate in political science at L'Université de Montréal. Dr. Lounnas will help us understand the armed actors in northern Mali, their agendas, and their motives. Djallil, the floor is yours.
So, Al-Qaeda in the Islamic Maghreb was born out of the ashes of the Algerian Civil War during the 1990s. What happened was that during the 1990s, there was this radical group called the Groupe Islamique Armé, GIA in French, which launched a campaign of massacres against the civilians in the mid-1990s. Further to that, the commander of the brigades of the GIA in the region called Kabylia in northern Algeria, a guy called Hassan Hattab, decided to split from the GIA and to create his own group. His group was called the Salafist Group for Predication and Combat, GSPC in French, with the full support of bin Laden. Now, the GSPC was a Salafi group by definition and very close to bin Laden, especially through the support of what we call the Algerian Afghans. Former Algerians who fought in Afghanistan were linked with bin Laden. What happened was this. Further to the 9/11 attacks in the United States and the invasion of Iraq in 2003, some members of the leadership of the GSPC thought it was time for the group to join the global fight against the West, to join the global fight against the United States. Hassan Hattab, the leader of the GSPC, actually thought the fight should remain in Algeria. During a meeting in August 2003, Hassan Hattab was removed from his leadership and replaced by a guy called Nabil Sahrawi, who was killed by the Algerian army in 2004, and especially by Drukdel, Abdelmalik Drukdel. Drukdel, when he became chief of the GSPC in 2004, started direct contacts with Al-Qaeda through Azarqawi and through former Libyan fighters that were linked to Al-Qaeda. Finally, in 2007, Al-Qaeda accepted to count the GSPC as one of its affiliates, with three main goals. The first goal was to unite all the jihadi groups in Northern Africa under the AQAM, Al-Qaeda in the Islamic Maghreb, number one. Goal number two, to renew the fight against local governments in North Africa, Morocco, Algeria, Tunisia, and Libya. Number three, which was the most important goal, to strike at the West. Now, as such, the deployment of AQAM in Sahel started in 2003. Before that date, the Sahel was a region used by the Islamist group in Algeria to smuggle weapons to northern Algeria. In 2003, there was this hostage-taking in Algeria, where 32 tourists were taken hostages by the GSPC group. Some of the hostages were freed by the Algerian army. The rest of the hostages were taken to North Mali, where they were exchanged for a ransom of 10 million euros. Further to that, the Algerian army blocked access to Algeria, which means that the GSPC brigade that was responsible for the hostage-taking was blocked in northern Mali. That's really the beginning of the deployment of AQAM in northern Mali, okay? Now, as such, AQAM counts three important brigades in northern Mali, in addition to one special case, which is Belmokhtar. Overall, they have 1,000 men, an estimate of 1,000 men, to which we have to add what we call local contractors. Local contractors are the Malians that work for Al-Qaeda in exchange of money. They are hired for hostage takings and some stuff like this. Now, AQAM is now led by a guy called Abu Hamam, Jamal Okasha, aka Abu Hamam, who used to be a lieutenant of Abu Zaid and Al-Mukhtar. The first most important brigade is called Ibn Ziyad Brigade. It's led by Abu Zaid, who we can see here. Abu Zaid. He's a hardcore jihadist and especially involved in the hostage takings in northern Mali. Then we have the second brigade led by Adakri Matargi. It's called the Ansar Brigade. And the third one is led by a guy called Mohammed Lamin Oud Hassan, and it's the former brigade led by Abu Hamam. Okay, three important brigades. Now, Belmokhtar is a special case. Why? You can see here Belmokhtar here. Belmokhtar actually is the oldest jihadi leader in Algeria. In 2004, he's the one who was supposed to become the leader of AQAM. He's the one who was supposed to become the leader of AQAM. However, Abdelmalik Drukdel double-crossed him. Drukdel double-crossed him and got elected as chief of the GSPC and then chief of AQAM. Because of this, Belmokhtar and Drukdel hate one another. They despise one another and are rivals. In 2005, Drukdel had Belmokhtar removed from his position as supreme emir of the brigades in the Sahel. Okay? After this, in retaliation, Belmokhtar became more or less independent from AQAM. He was officially part of AQAM, but in effect, evolving alone. He was autonomous from the AQAM. For example, in 2008-2009, Belmokhtar on his own decided to sign a truce with the Algerian government on his own, without even asking for the authorization from Drukdel. Finally, in December 2012, Drukdel decided to remove Belmokhtar from the leadership of his brigade. In retaliation, Belmokhtar officially split from AQAM. Belmokhtar is, I've met with some people who met him and some people who interviewed him, he's considered as a kind of a godfather in the region. He's been involved a lot in drug trafficking, but also he's a former jihadist. He was in Afghanistan. He fought in the 1980s in the Soviet Union. He fought during the Algerian Civil War in the 1990s. And he's considered to be like more wiser, less radical to a certain extent, less radical as much as you can be when you talk about Al-Qaeda. He's considered as someone we can talk to. That's why the Algerians had many times tried to reach out to him, to negotiate a truce with him. And they managed in 2008, 2009 to get him to signing a truce. Now, starting from this, what are the relations between AQIM and the local population in northern Mali? AQIM has followed a strategy of what we call socialization in the region, trying to adapt to its environment in which it was evolving. AQIM at the origin was based on Algerians, Arab Algerians. The first thing the AQIM did when they deployed itself in northern Mali was not to interfere with religion. Most of the population in northern Mali is based on Sufism, what we call Sufism in northern Mali. AQIM, on the other hand, it's what we call Salafism. Okay, it's a strict application of the Quran and the Sunnah. Sufism is based on interpretation, the cult of saints, which is considered as bid'ah, kufr, in the Salafi perception. Okay, infidels. But because most of the population was Sufi, AQIM decided not to interfere with religion. I met a former jihadist and I asked him this question. I was like, how come you didn't touch the Sufi? How come you didn't say anything about them and you didn't attack them? The answer was clear. The most important thing is we are all Muslim. Regardless, we are Sufi, Maliki, whatever, the most important thing is to be Muslim and the jihad against the West. That's all. The rest, it's just talk. That was his answer. Why did he say this? It was to adapt. It was a strategy of adaptation to the context of northern Mali. That's one thing. Also, by putting the emphasis on fighting against Israel and the United States, the AQIM played on something which was very important there in the region. People are very concerned about the Middle East. People are extremely concerned. If you go to Nouakchott, for example, you see areas called Sarajevo, Bosnia, Fallujah, Zarqawi, and so on. Okay, people are concerned about what's going on in the Middle East. And to that extent, by putting the fight, emphasizing the fight against the West, they managed to attract a limited amount of people in their organization. Also, they play the role of what we call social security. How? AQIM is the richest organization in the region. Through the hostage taking, they made 100 million euros in less than 3 or 4 years. With this, what do? They go to the local population and they buy products for food. Like that. For example, they buy food from the local population, but they buy it at the double or the triple of the prices. They never bargain the prices, number one. Number two, they make loans to the local population. You want to buy a house? No problem. This is money. And this is the money you need. And they tend to forget the loans, kind of. But when I come to you and ask for a service, then you have to say yes to me. That's one strategy they follow. They make loans. They help the sick and the poor people, transportation to hospitals and so on. They try to help the local population. They also follow the policy of contracting marriages with the local population, with women from the local populations. For example, Belmukhtar. Belmukhtar got married with a girl from a local tribe, the Brabish. This is in order to get protection from the local tribes. Now, this policy of getting married has limits. Usually a tribe gets married with a tribe, this equals an alliance. In the case of Belmukhtar, for example, or other people who got married with people from the tribes, it doesn't make an alliance, but it offers some limited protection to AQIM in the region, okay? They also follow the policy of trying to promote Targi leaders. This is to attract the Targi population. For example, Abdelkrim Targi. Abdelkrim Targi is a cousin of Igad Ali. We'll come back to the Igad Ali in a few seconds, okay? This is to attract the local population. They also learn the Hassaniya. The Hassaniya is the language of the local population. This also plays a major role in the region, talking the same language of the local population. And finally, I'm not going to get into this much. They got also involved into all kinds of traffics, especially drug traffickings and so on. My friend here, Rida, is going to talk about it more in details. But through this, they became very important to the local economy. Okay. Now, in spite of all this strategy, AQIM did not AQIM did not manage to get a large popular support among the population. They get accepted, but people did not get involved that much in the fighting of the AQIM. Most of the fighters of AQIM remained Arabs, Algerians, Libyans, Tunisians, Arabs from Mali, and so on. Local Targis, for example, did not get involved in AQIM. That's why they managed something important was to strike a deal with Igad Ali, who formed Ansar Din, the leader of the Ansar Din. Igad Ali is a hero among the local Targis of the rebellions in the 1990s. Igad Ali is a Salafi. He's a strong believer in Salafism. Igad Ali have ties, developed ties with commanders of AQIM, especially Bel Mukhtar and Abu Zaid. Okay? Igad Ali formed Ansar Din and became the most important ally of AQIM in the region. For AQIM, the key is Ansar Din, because Ansar Din attracts local Targis, local Salafis. This is the key for AQIM, to get the local population support. It's very important for AQIM to keep the alliance of Ansar Din, because this is where they get the support from the Targi population. Okay. Now, the strategy of promoting the Targis backfired on AQIM. Why? Because the Arabs, especially the Arab Malians that fought in AQIM, felt that they were not properly recognized or rewarded by AQIM leaders. Okay? Especially through the promotion of the Abdelkrim Targi. Most of the fighters of AQIM are Arabs, Malian Arabs. A lot of them are Malian Arabs. They were not promoted. They did not get rewarded. Therefore, in 2011, the Movement for Unity and Jihad in Western Africa was created. It split from those who fought in AQIM and felt that they were not rewarded. Okay, they split from AQIM. Now, the goal is to establish an Islamic State in all Africa, the region, the Sahelian region, and they target especially Algeria. The main target was Algeria, 2011. They fought against the Malian government forces, but the main attacks were conducted against Algerian government and troops in the region. They have a few hundred men. We don't know exactly how many, but probably 600, 700, maybe more than that. But contrary to AQIM, they're not that well trained. AQIM fighters are very well trained, especially during the Algerian civil war and so on. They have a lot of Libyans that were among the rebellions in Libya in the 1990s. The Mujao, on the other hand, is not that strong. Not that strong in terms of his fighters are not well trained compared to AQIM. And also a lot of fighters of the Mujao split and joined Ansar Din. For example, a full brigade of Mujao joined Ansar Din a few months ago. Now, as a conclusion, what can we say? AQIM did not manage to achieve the goals that were assigned to her by Qaeda leadership. Number one, they did not manage to unite all the jihadi groups in Northern Africa. Different reasons, probably maybe for example, in the case of Libya and in the case of Tunisia, the regimes were very tight on Gaddafi and Ben Ali, and they held the grip over the people, the local population, and it was very difficult for the Islamists to join AQIM. Same thing I would say for Morocco. In recent weeks, recent months, however, we've seen that a lot of fighters from AQIM were composed of Libyans and Tunisians. Very few Moroccans, on the other hand. That's probably linked to the collapse of the state in both, of the weakening of the state in both Tunisia and Libya. I've talked to Libyans and people who are in Libya that told me that there's a huge problem in the south and there's no state control in the region. It's Libyan control. That helps a lot AQIM in the region, number one. Number two, the goal of the jihad against local governments. Here again, fail. Nothing happened in Morocco. There is no renewal of jihad against the king in Morocco. In Algeria, actually, the switch from GSPC to AQIM led to the surrender of hundreds of men from 2005 to 2010. Many leaders of the GSPC and AQIM surrendered to the Algerian army. Actually, it weakened in Algeria the GSPC or the AQIM. Same thing in Tunisia, same thing in Libya until 2011. I don't talk about post-2011 situation because there was the Arab Spring and it plays a major role in the situation of AQIM. Finally, they never managed to strike at the West. The last attack in the West was in 2005. A big attack was in 2005 in London. Okay, they did take hostages, but hostages were exchanged for money. Okay, not for political purpose. Also, French intervention led to a split of Ansar ad-Din. Okay, Ansar ad-Din split 2 weeks ago into two branches. There was what we call the movement, the Islamic movement for Azawad, was created by leaders of Ansar ad-Din who distantiate themselves from Igad Ali. The thing is that Igad Ali has still control over the troops on the ground. Okay, so according to the people I talked to, they told me that even if this split has not made any impact for the time being on the ground. Okay, Igad Ali, through his personality, his status of hero, and so on, did not still hold his troops. Number one. Number two, most of the fighters, a lot of fighters that were among Ansar ad-Din, have switched side to the National Liberation Movement of Azawad, the Targi movement. That's one thing we have to take into account. So, how much are they willing to fight their former colleagues or friends? That's one question we have to ask ourselves. AQIM has retreated to the Afoga region, which is mountainous region on the Algerian-Malian border. And they are likely to follow a strategy of guerrilla warfare, okay? For them, it's not a problem. Retreating, coming back, striking, and so on, it's not a problem. So it's not perceived as a defeat. The problem is that they will stay there. Okay, they don't mind fighting, they don't mind dying. They don't mind staying fighting on a long period of time. I mean, like I said, I talked to this couple of former jihadists, and when you talk to them, you have this feeling that time is on their side. Okay, it's not like they're not fighting over a period of 2-5 years or so on. They're fighting over a long period of time. Okay, when they talk to you about the battles, when they talk to you about the fighting, they compare themselves to the battles of the Prophet. Time is on their side. Their perception. It's no problem. We can stay here 5 years, 10 years, 20 years, 30 years, no problem. How many years do you think the West can stay in the region? Are they willing to take losses? We don't mind. We want to die. For us, it's a glory to die. It's to dying as a martyr. For them, it's a disaster. That's one thing you have to take into account. It's very important to take into account. The notion of time, the notion of perception, how they analyze the situation. It's always through the battles of the Prophet. Always. And you talk to them, they know better than you and me how to use the internet. But trust me, they live like in 7th century. Everything is analyzed through the battles of the Prophet. Losing the battle is no problem. As a conclusion, I mean, it's true that the French have retaken Gao, Timbuktu, Kidal, and so on. That's true. But I would say, very much like the Americans have experienced in Afghanistan, I would say it's just the beginning. Taking the cities was the easy part. Getting rid of them would be the hardest part. I mean, the Sahel is a huge region. Nobody controls the Sahel. I mean, even people say Algeria cannot control the Sahel. Nobody can control the Sahel. You can foster regional cooperation and so on, help economically the population and so on, but the fact of the matter is it's going to be a long time warfare. And I think that's it. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Djallil, for that. I think we have some sense of the history, some role of independent contractors, some of the leadership rivalries, some of the efforts at socialization, religiously, economically, culturally, and so on. You really gave us an overview of the different actors, AQIM, Ansar ad-Din, Mujao, and some of the splits. You gave us some of the specific goals and really sketched the current situation. So thanks very much for that presentation. I'd like to move now to our second presenter. Before I do, I want to mention that for those of you who are tweeting, you could tweet at the hashtag ACSS Mali. So we'll be tweeting, and I know that some of our colleagues are doing that. Let's turn now to Rida Naimouri. Mr. Naimouri is an analyst with the Davanti Group. He specializes in security in northern Mali and the Sahel, and he focuses specifically on issues of trafficking in the region. Mr. Naimouri has conducted on-the-ground interviews with members of Malian Tuareg rebel groups, members of the Islamist group Ansar ad-Din, Malian elected officials, and individuals accused of trafficking in Mali and Morocco. Mr. Naimouri is a Boren Fellow who studied at Georgetown University. Mr. Laimouri will be providing us with insights into drug trafficking and transnational organized crime in northern Mali. Redda, the floor is yours.
There are several reasons why drug trafficking has been developed in West Africa. Corruption, the perfect geographical location between South America and Europe, especially in the last decade or two. Poverty, disorganization, not to mention weak government, if not disorganized governments. For example, in the last decade, since 2000, there have been at least 11 coups d'etat in the region. Most of the time are related to narcotics trafficking. The example of Guinea-Bissau, the assassination of the president of Guinea-Bissau in 2007. Also, civil wars, assassinations, and so forth. Northern Mali is no exception. Has witnessed several rebellions, the last one that started in January 17, 2012. Earlier 2012, armed groups, including Al-Qaeda in the Islamic Maghreb, AQIM, Ansar al-Din, the National Movement for the Liberation of the Azawad, the MNLA, and the Movement for Tawheed and Jihad in West Africa, or Mujwa, seized control of the majority of big cities, the majority of towns in northern Mali in a matter of 3 months. This indicates how weak the Malian military is. Affected by the combination of different factors, northern Mali became a vulnerable region or area for illicit trafficking, terrorism, and organized crime. In order to understand the crisis in northern Mali, and more broadly, the growing instability in the region, it is necessary to go beyond the involvement or the role of AQIM and jihadist organizations. It is interesting that everyone now is interested to know the role or the relationship between AQIM and narcotics trafficking in the region, while the majority also ignore the relationship between government officials with those criminal organizations or narcotics trafficking networks. So it is important to keep that in mind. First, I would like to talk about how illicit trafficking contributes to instability in northern Mali. From a security standpoint, narcotics trafficking specifically and other illegal armed trafficking trade have developed damaged states structured by increasing corruption in both in the security level and also at the central governments, and helping also limit any ability or intention to actively fight AQIM in the region. Additionally, this various trafficking network helped prop up local actors while undermining local authorities, or we call them the traditional authorities, or elders, tribe leaders as well. This plays into a larger generation conflict in addition to enforcing or reinforcing pre-existing tensions between communities or local tribes. I'm referring here to intercommunity conflicts. For example, in January 2010, an armed group made of Ifugas Tuareg and Kunta Arabs attacked a cocaine convoy that was transported by Lemhar with Imra Tuareg in northern Kidal and seized a large amount of cocaine. This incident led the Lemhar to respond by kidnapping Baba Wuld Sidi al-Mukhtar, who's the leader of the Kunta Arabs in the Gao region. Later on was released. The reasons why, I'm sure they negotiated some deal. Members of Lemhar smuggling networks are well known in northern Mali. In addition to the Barabish in the Timbuktu region, including, for example, tribes of Ould Idris, Oulad Ghanem, and so forth. There are at least 30 or 40 factions of Barabish in Timbuktu region and Gao. Another example is the famous air cocaine that was landed in Tarkint in Gao, carrying allegedly 6 tons of cocaine that was disappeared in a matter of hours without any authorities noticing that. Later on, the plane was found burned. Nobody knew where it came from. There were reports that came in from South America, but nobody knew exactly who was involved. However, they were members of the Lamhar community, businessmen and officials that they were accused and arrested, of course, later released. And this tells you how strong the trafficking network is in northern Mali, or in Mali in general, in collaboration with networks outside of Mali. And by the way, this is not the first or the last airplane that was landed in northern Mali. In addition, there were also reports that low-altitude airplanes made drops of cocaine in the region. And finally, of course, the Straits helped AQIM, indirectly or directly, financially, to lead operations before and after the fall of northern Mali. Let me talk now about how these armed groups in northern Mali benefited from illicit trafficking in northern Mali. I'm going to talk about AQIM, Ansar Dine, and Mujwa as the same group because they do collaborate, they do work together, and leave the MNLA separately. I'll talk about it as well. It is hard to say. Experts I spoke to in the US, Europe, and Africa, they said that AQIM's income, 90% of AQIM's income comes from kidnappings for ransoms, while 10% comes from the illicit trafficking or narcotics trafficking specifically. I personally don't know how they got these numbers. I don't know how they did it, and I don't know if they could. Also, I'm not sure if they are right. The only explanation I could come up with is because most of the deals are done outside of northern Mali. So probably that's why AQIM never got a huge chunk of that money. So we usually, if it includes tens of thousands of dollars or hundreds of thousands of dollars, the maximum, by securing areas or helping transiting the cocaine or other drugs in northern Mali. So, but I agree that kidnapping for ransoms was the main driver for AQIM in the last decade. One thing to keep in mind is that AQIM, or back in the 90s, the Islamist armed group, GIA in French, in Algeria, got under Mukhtar Bou'l-Mukhtar, as Djallil mentioned, got involved in the trafficking, illicit trafficking back earlier in the 90s, or mid-90s to late 90s, but never got really involved until Mukhtar Bou'l-Mukhtar joined GSPC after 1998. The turning point was the large sum of money that the group generated from the kidnapping of large tourists in south of Algeria in 2003. That's when Mukhtar Bou'l-Mukhtar expanded his network, built ties in northern Mali to expand his illicit trafficking networks in the area. Djallil touched on that, how they built ties with marriage, financing, helping the community, and just establishing a good example. And people there living in grievances, they welcomed that with open arms. So as I mentioned, the turning point was the kidnapping and the large money generated in 2003. Since then, most of the Western intelligence agencies focused on the kidnappings while ignoring illicit trafficking until recently, with the increase of cocaine trafficking in the region. As cocaine trade was increasing in the region after 2006, AQIM expanded its networks, and it started offering services, fees in order to transit or pass by routes or areas that controls. It is doubted, I doubted that AQIM was involved in any distribution or transportation of drug traffic, of drugs, any type of drugs. However, I spoke to one witness, local in Gao, told me that sometimes they carry with them drugs, but to just use as a form of payment for small business transactions, to do their shopping or whatever they need it for, but not usually for any large transactions. And yes, they do go to markets, local markets, weekly markets to do their, to buy their necessities as well. As for who's benefited the most from illicit trafficking of those groups, I would say AQIM and Mujwa benefited tremendously from illicit trafficking, especially if the reports about Mujwa being financed by Lamhar businessmen definitely have benefited from it. Ansar Din and Ayad Ghali has benefited because it just seemed that money appeared magically to Ansar Din in February 2012. The group is not, Ansar Din is not known to have any solid source of money like AQIM for, as we know, has that source of from kidnappings and so forth. As for the MNLA, is the least that has benefited from trafficking. Most of their finances comes from local populations, contributions from refugee camps, and small trafficking of products such as cooking oil, flour, or sugar or tea. Usually have a small benefit. The damage of trafficking is no surprise to anyone here. The damages that caused, speaking to local officials and locals in northern Mali, the damages are usually reported by the UN reports as well, includes corruption, corrupted government, increased arms trafficking, illegal arms trafficking, and the inner community tensions, to just mention a few. The last one is true, the inner community conflict, because in an area like northern Mali where ethnic groups is a vital factor. Also, those young people in northern Mali joining armed groups or joining illicit trafficking are setting a bad example for youth, other youth that come in, that growing in the area. I've read by Judith Siegle. She's done extensive research in northern Mali about illicit trafficking. She spoke to a 9-year-old in Khalil on the border with Algeria, and he was driving a truck at the age of 9. His dream was to just be like everyone else, being involved in illicit trafficking. That's how significant the issue is. I also spoke to a local who told me, I asked him about what is the job that everyone wants in northern Mali, or that is in high demand. Can anyone guess what it is? Drivers. You have drivers of 4 wheels who knows the area, who's courageous, who's brave, and who's willing to take $5,000, whatever, to drive some sort of shipments in northern Mali. This brings me to 4 points of analysis that I would like to share with you based on what is going on right now in northern Mali and the intervention of France. The first point is, let's not ignore it, is that drug money has played a major role in destabilizing the area and the conflict contributed in the instability in northern Mali. Let's not underestimate that. Second point is that if the Sahel and northern Mali specifically continues to be a transit point between South America and Europe, instability will continue to grow and the conflicts will continue to happen one after another. Additionally, alliances between AQIM and illicit traffickers will continue to exist and further destabilize northern Mali. The third point is, as kidnappings for ransoms to AQIM will decrease because of the absence of foreign nationals in northern Mali or the Sahel in general, will affect its income. So they will look for alternatives, obviously. The alternative will be engage more in illicit trafficking. That's not the first alternative I think they will be interested in. The fourth point is, in recent incidents in Cape Verde and Nigeria, and the dismantling of cocaine labs or other stimulants like amphetamine labs, it's probably an indication that Africa is becoming more than just a transit point, but also a producer, which will bring other issues to Africa and the West Africa and the Sahel more specifically. Finally, I would like to conclude with the issue that I would like to address and things to keep in mind. People need to look seriously about where the trade has moved since instability started in northern Mali. Traffickers prefer weak states, but not totally disorganized states, because that doesn't allow them for sometimes the protection from local military or local officials. That's something to keep in mind. The other point is whether or not the trade will come back to northern Mali when the north is calmer. There will be a tremendous motivation, incentive for traffickers to take advantage of weak military, under-financed military after they go back to northern Mali. They will take advantage of that because it will become weak and underfunded. So they will exploit that opportunity. So we are at serious risk here on going through the same cycle that has existed in northern Mali before the rebellion started. And thank you, and I welcome any questions later on.
Thanks very much, Ridda, for that overview. I think we really saw some of the weaknesses and vulnerabilities in the government. You mentioned corruption. You traced some of the connections between or among transnational organized crime, violent extremist organizations, and government officials. Talked about some of the effects, government fragility, some of the effects on the social structure between communities or between generations. You talked about some of the complex relations between the violent extremist organizations and specific drug trafficking, gave us some sense of the damage done, and then gave us a handful of points to look for as we analyze the current situation. So thanks very much for that overview. So we've had a look at some of the armed groups, we've looked at some trafficking, and now we'd like to turn to some of the underlying causes and some of the larger trends with our final presenter. So we have with us Mathurin Unikpo. Dr. Unikpo is the academic chair for civil-military relations at the Africa Center for Strategic Studies. He specializes in questions of civil-military relations and democratic governance, especially in West Africa. Dr. Unikpo is very widely published, and he has received many grants and awards, and he has held several teaching and editorial positions. Prior to entering the academy, Dr. Unikpo served in the Ministry of Foreign Affairs in Benin. And Dr. Unikpo will comment on some of the underlying causes of instability in northern Mali and sketch some possible policy directions for the way forward. So Dr. Matt, the floor is now yours.
Obviously, you can tell from the two previous speakers how complex this issue is. And I have a word of caution for those of you who are involved in policy implication or finding solution or whatever, to take it easy. This is not a joke. This is not a very simple issue. You can just go and come up with some solution. It's going to take some kind of deep digging to really know what happened, where we are, and how we can resolve the issue. Mine is going to be kind of trying to take you back a little bit into history, because there seems to be a great deal of ambiguity, amalgamation, and confusion. In terms of Tuareg, when you talk about Tuareg, we are talking about basically 10% of the population of Mali. Okay? And the Tuaregs are not the only population in the northern part of Mali either. You have the Songhai, the Fulani, there are other folks in northern Mali. Okay? And the Tuareg do not constitute a monolithic bloc. You have that tendency also to put all of them in one basket, the Tuareg. No, you have clans. And sometimes, like in the case of Somalia, clans can be more important than even the whole ethnic group. Tuaregs are not fundamentalists. No, they were not even Muslim to begin with. They got converted, and they are not all Muslim. They tend to have they don't apply strict Islam, okay? We have what I call the 3 T's: the Tuaregs, the terrorists, and the traffickers. And that's where we put all of them, bungle all of them together, and that creates some kind of confusion. If you have that confusion to begin with, it is likely that your solution, you are going to have a wonderful solution to the wrong questions, as far as I'm concerned. Okay. Not all Tuaregs are rebels. Not all Tuaregs are terrorists, and they are not all traffickers either. It is not easy to find out who is who, but that's something we need to be aware of. Okay. We also have Tuaregs in Niger, but we don't have what is going on in Mali going on in Niger. Maybe that's something we need to bear in mind. Why is Niger trying, or how is Niger managing the Tuareg question and Mali is not? Okay. What is really important to me to remember here, there's a very strong perception of exclusion. So we have some genuine issues from the very, very beginning. Genuine grievances that the Tuareg have always had. Okay, now you add that to some other issues when the traffickers came to town and the terrorists came to town. And to me, what is important is to distinguish, be careful, and take away those genuine grievances and try to address them. Once you address those genuine grievances, you know what is futile out there, what you can do. But if you bundle them together, call all of them terrorists, all of them traffickers, without addressing some serious, genuine concern that they have, we are never going to make it. As far as my presentation is going to concern, I have 4 factors that we need to consider, at least bear in mind. We have some ancient ethnic hatred that to me goes back to 14th, 15th, even 16th century, when you have the Ghana Empire, Mali, Gao, Songhai. You still have the Tuareg always been there, one of the ancient populations out there. And the whole transnational trade that we talk about in history, we discussed. Guess who are those who are involved in charge of those trade? The Tuareg were the one going all the way from Byzantine Empire all the way to Ghana, bringing salt against, battering salt against gold. So that's why I'm not surprised when my friend Liam was talking about barter. Some of them right now still have cocaine or whatever to just go to the market against some tomato or some other thing. That's the barter system as old as Africa. Okay. So we have those things. We also have economic issues of access to land. Land is something very important in Tuareg. So if you really talk about grievances and you don't address the land issue, you are not really going to please the Tuareg. You have a political claim of sovereignty. After the issue of land was not resolved, you end up having, let's have our own, let's secede, let's have our own land. But it didn't begin that way, okay? And now you have the whole Malian government handling the whole Tuareg issue, how the government has dealt with it. So I have basically 4 points. I'm going to talk about the socioeconomic grievances. And long-simmering frustration has been going on for quite a while. And to do that, you have to go back, as I said, in history, before the French, and when the French came, what they saw, they didn't like what they saw. They saw some Tuareg really being in charge of the land. And the French, when they wanted to colonize after the Berlin Conference, wanted to be in charge as opposed to having somebody in charge. So right there you have a problem already. Tuareg resenting the French treatment of them. In fact, the first rebellion was 1914 all the way to 1916. Before 61, 64, that's the very first rebellion, where the Tuareg simply resented the French, could not accept what was going on. They were the one in charge, and now somebody is coming to put, no, they could not take that. Okay, on top of that, you have, of course, Tuareg treatment of the blacks, in Gao, Songhai, and other empires. They play an important role in terms of capturing or taking blacks all the way to the Mediterranean, to European. So the Tuareg also did play a role in slavery. Okay. Now, if you take that and go back to 1961, right after independence, Modibo Keita, the first president, came up with a land reform. Okay, for people who are really attached to land, when you talk about land reform, that is not good news, given what they have suffered under the French when it was French Sudan, Sudan Français. Now, to have the government of Mali, Bamako, coming off a land reform, the impression was, well, we are going to be attacked again. Right there, you have some animosity flaring up again. Now, after that, you have 1961 all the way to 64. That's when you have the Tuareg rebelling, attacking government infrastructure left and right, out of anger, out of frustration. Okay? But the issue was not resolved. You have the government trying to appease some of them, bring some of them in the government, token representation, but the thorough, kind of structural problem was still there. Okay? Now we come to 1990, where you have a very serious rebellion in 1990. Okay? But in the government called a meeting with the mediation of Algeria. So in 1991, they have the agreement of Tamaranset, where basically Tuareg and the government, they came together. Okay? When they came together, they came up with a lot of suggestion, integration of Tuareg rebels into the Malian army, increased decentralization of government offices, greater national investment in northern Mali's infrastructure, the kind of thing that you think will appease or help for the Tuareg. Okay, they took that, but unfortunately, the government did not fully implement those agreements. Okay, now we come all the way back to 95, another rebellion, another national pact, another agreement in 96, once again, not fully implemented. Okay, if you come all the way, 2006, there's also another accord for the restoration of peace and security for the development of the northern Kidal region, what they call Azawad. Once again, you have a whole set of measures for better participation of the local people in the decision-making process, stimulate and accelerate economic, social, and cultural development in Kidal. But once again, nothing was really done. In fact, they set up some fund, Programme spécial pour la paix et le développement des régions du nord du Mali. Just a program to kind of change things, to do differently. Unfortunately, that money was used, first of all, embezzled. Half of it went where money goes in Africa normally. Okay, now, the second half, you bribe some Tuareg leaders, and the last chunk, you put garrison, you build barracks. So you have people who are frustrated, are asking you, attend to our needs. Help us out. We have some development needs here. The government comes with money that the EU, US, and other partners have given. But now they use that money to build army camps, barracks left and right, as opposed to addressing. So right there you have another set of frustration coming up. So altogether what we have is, a situation that did not really help the Tuareg case. The question was not really properly addressed. Because there's supposed to be airfield in Kidal. That's what the money was supposed to do. Suppose electrification, regional radio, telephone coverage, some of these basic things that most people take for granted these days. That's what these people were asking for. And if you have ever traveled to that part of Mali, you see indeed a contrast, okay, in terms of development infrastructure. So that's where we are until, as I said, 2006. That was the last accord that was supposed to be implemented. Once again, nothing happened. Now, all this raised some governance issues when you talk about Mali. You have what I call reverse frustration in non-Tuareg communities. Because believe it or not, those who are not Tuareg resent the fact that every time there's a problem, the Tuareg will come with a set of grievances. And the government is obliged to attend to their needs or think about it, at least pretend to have a meeting. Whereas the non-Tuareg have their whole set of grievances also that nobody's talking about. Okay? You have what I call undemocratic nature of the state. Because believe it or not, and that's a lesson that the West need to learn, you can't just say democracy and applaud democracy without really knowing what is going on beneath democracy. Mali was a democracy, great, wonderful, but how democratic was that democracy? Nobody check it out. So you have that problem. You have some frustration even within the government going on. You have unhealthy civil-military relations, a very big gap between the leadership, the top. In fact, President Atete promoted close to 50 or whatever general I heard at the last time before end up being kicked out. So you simply cannot promote overnight 30 or 40 or 50 generals. The last time I checked in military procedure, I'm not in the military, but in my profession, you can't do that. You have what I call misguided policies. Large sum of money thrown at the north, but you just need to grab a couple of leaders, Tuareg leaders who are vocal, give them money, buy them up, they are all quiet. The problem is still there waiting for you next time. Just like those who drink thinking the problem will go away. You wake up the following morning confused, but the problem is still there waiting for you. Embezzle, you also have embezzlement by the government. So these are the kind of issues that we have going on. So we have history here that is not helping. We have the government that did not really handle the issue seriously. On top of that, now you have terrorists and traffickers who came to town, okay? And they have money available. That's the lethal combination we are dealing with today. Now, in terms of policy implication or recommendation, I just have a few of them. I think the argument in favor of preserving Mali's territorial integrity is easy to understand. The West's primary interest in Mali is fighting Al-Qaeda in the Islamic Maghreb and preserving Mali's 20 years of democracy, if one can call it that way. Mali is active in several programs, initiatives, and organizations in the region and has been a valued and reliable partner of the West. Okay? The US, the AU, they are all concerned that unrest in Mali could spread, and even African countries, and a lack of central authority could lead to a safe haven for Al-Qaeda. Maybe it's too late already, I don't know. But that's really what. Now, in terms of recommendation, the first one to me, there got to be some political negotiation between the central government and the Tuareg. The Malian government needs to be able to know who is who can we talk to, and try to address the fundamental issue here. There are some structural problems that we can't run away from. Okay, that's to me the very, very first one. Right now, the obstacle to adopting that approach lies in the double crisis of legitimacy and authority. The government that is right there right now, in terms of legitimacy, authority, there is a problem since the coup. So steps need to be taken, as far as I'm concerned, to really trying to address the political issue. Nobody can run away from that. If you don't do that, there's no solution after that. Second, in terms of Al-Qaeda, AQM, and various branches and elite, there got to be some coordinated effort, at the level of the region, to support, and with the support of the international community. And one of the complexities of this issue, even within West Africa, there's no unanimity on how to deal with Al-Qaeda or how to deal with Mali. What the mediator, Burkina Faso, is doing is different from what Benin or Senegal or whatever is thinking of, which is one problem right there. I'm not even sure the Western nations are together either. We are talking about national interest here, and we know that in international relations, at the end of the day, that's what it's coming down to. The French interest, I don't know whether they really align properly with the US or the British and others. That is not evident. They need to come together as far as I'm concerned. And although they are taking into account their own national interest, see what they can come together to really address that issue. Okay. Now, 3, we have the region. There are some effort in the region through ECOWAS, and I think I believe they need some kind of support, serious support within ECOWAS to try to address that issue. And that cooperation cannot be limited to military and police, because we are talking about security versus or security and development here. There got to be some serious attempt to resolve that issue. Number 4, in terms of priority, there got to be more effort to dry up the sources of terrorism. I think we know clearly who those guys are. We have a clear sense. What always bothered me is there seems to be a central kind of headquarters of intelligence gathering in Tamaranset. But somehow, the Tuareg who left Libya with several, kilometers of trucks overcharged with weapons. Nobody saw them. Hello? There seems to be something funny here. You can't just have a whole line of trucks with weapons. Mali has no border with Libya. How did they manage to leave Libya all the way, several days? We are not talking about just overnight, quick. No, you can't do that. How did they get to Mali without the center in Tamaranset not knowing? And CIA, FBI, with all what we have out there looking at, what happened here? What happened here? Somebody has to explain what happened here. That we didn't know, we didn't see that coming. And the fact that this guy came with the weapons and were welcomed by ATT at the border, nobody kind of disarmed them, allowed them to come in. This issue, somebody should have picked us somewhere. So all those we are paying big money for not doing the job, they need to go home and maybe start farming the land. That's not right. That is simply not right, okay? Now, so we need to make sure when it comes to terrorism, we are more serious together and take some steps to address that. Now, in terms of other recommendations, it's essential that high-impact social plans. Once the French leave, we need to start right away. We need to launch some program, or the West need to assist the government so that we start thinking about what kind of social plan could be put in place. There got to be some action to contain the sources of arms proliferation. That trafficking network, make sure they are identified and dismantled. Ultimately, every necessary precaution should be taken to avoid what I call Afghanization or Somalization of northern Mali. And we need to have a rapid restoration of the authority, agreement on the part of the international community, what I call trust but verify, regular checks on the state of democracy and governance in Mali. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Dr. Matt. I think you really gave us some clear ideas about distinguishing among groups or between groups of Tuaregs, terrorists, traffickers. Gave us a good sense of some historical grievances, particularly of the Tuareg. Talked about some of the socioeconomic dynamics and land dynamics. Highlighted a few specific problems related to grievances, undemocratic states, CMR, civil-military relations, uses of money. Pointed out a couple of the challenges of some specific programs like CEMOC at Tamanrasset or PSPSDN, and so on. And it's also gave us a bridge, I think, toward our second session with some policy possibilities. I appreciate the fact that all of the speakers have stayed within their time. It leaves us about 45 minutes, I believe, or 40 minutes for question and answer. I'd like to go now to the participants here and take maybe 2 or 3 questions so that we can have some responses from our panelists. I'll ask you to identify yourself by name and institution, and please keep your question or comment brief so that we can take as many as possible and get as many responses as possible.
My name is Liliana Rodriguez. I am from Argentina, Military Cultural Foundation, and NDU former student. My question is, how many important airports does this kind of landlocked country have in order to make all its activities, and where are they located?
Okay. Yeah, please, sir.
My name is Mohammed Tolba. I'm from the Library of Congress. And my question is, I'm always intrigued by the relationship between this group and Algeria. And the first question is why Mojwa is attacking Algeria, and the group is claiming to jihad in West Africa. And also, from what I see in the press, is Ansar ad-Din is kind of managing to be close to Algeria. So how that square with the fact that Ansar ad-Din is close to AKIM, which is the enemy of Algeria? So thank you very much.
Thank you. I think we have one over here. So, yeah.
William Zarpin from SAIS. We don't talk much about the Trans-Sahel initiative these days. I wonder if somebody could explain how is it that we trained the Malian army or parts of it and were in close contact with it, and then they all left or to do nothing or to join the Tuareg. What happened?
Thanks. Let's have a first round of responses and we'll come back. I see a lot of hands in the room.
Okay, I'll take the question regarding the Algeria and so on. For the airports, I mean, I think the region is Mali is a huge region. It's full of airports, roads. I mean, in planes you can just land on like just a road or whatever. That's what it happens. That's how it happens. There are also airports like they land through the corruption. I mean, my friend mentioned here through the corruption. Also, many planes managed to land like in Bamako International Airport. Through the money laundering and so on. So, but I'll focus more on the question of the links with Algeria. Mujao focused, like I said, Mujao is split from AQIM. As I said at the beginning, the main focus of AQIM, however, was Algeria. They fought against Algeria. And the Mujao, to that extent, fought mostly when it was created against the Algerian government. If you look at the figures, its attacks were happened in Algeria. That's the strategy they decided to follow, probably to show to AQIM that they were also fighting everywhere. Not also they conducted attacks in the region, but most of their attacks were in Algeria. Now, regarding the question of Ansar Dine and AQIM and Algeria, Algeria, it's true, tried to create links with Ansar Dine. Why? When I was in Algiers, I interviewed several people from the government, police, security services, and so on, and they explained to me that this strategy came from the Algerian experience in the civil war. Okay, why? During the Algerian civil war, how the Algerian government managed to basically destroy the Islamic groups in Algeria? It's when they cut the local population from the groups. Okay, so the Algerians, what did they tell me? They told me that basically Ansar Dine is the key, and actually it is, for the local population support from the population. AQIM, as Mr. here said it, had not managed over a period of 10 years to recruit a lot of people from the local population for different issues, different reasons. Getting the support of Ansar Dine was a key for them. And for Algerians, therefore, cutting Ansar Dine from AQIM was also the key to solve the problem of AQIM and the Mujao. I mean, AQIM and Mujao are international companies, if you want to say. Formed of mostly of Libyans, Algerians, Moroccans, whatever you have. It's not mostly the Malian the Malians are not that much involved in AQIM. Okay, if you cut Ansar Dine from AQIM, then AQIM gets back to where it was, a foreign entity in a country that is not its country. That's why Algeria tried to follow this strategy of cutting the population from AQIM. Now, for obvious reasons, which are ideological reasons, religious, political reasons, whatever you have, they did not manage to achieve this goal. I mean, Ansar Dine did sign an agreement with Algeria and Bamako early, like a few weeks ago, and then Igad Ali decided to quit the table of negotiations and to denounce this agreement. That's why we have the split that I talked about earlier between inside Ansar Dine. Thank you.
Just to address your question about airports, you talk about Northern Mali specifically. Northern Mali has several airports. It depends how big the airplane you want to land there. Timbuktu, Gao, Kidal, and also Tessalit all the way on the border with Algeria has an important airport. When we say airports, it's not the Western standardized, standards of an airport. Talking about airfields, sometimes it is hard. It is like a real airport, but sometimes it's just dirt. And a lot of towns in Northern Mali has this railways, so there's this airfields that are just dirt, and airplanes are able to land there without any problems. So there are airports that France actually using right now in Timbuktu, Kidal, and Gao. As for the military training, the U.S. did this job to train. It's not your responsibility when you train someone to. I'm just taking a shot at it. I'm not any expert. I didn't train any Northern Malian military, but you train them. You do your job. Then it's up to them. When you teach, for example, a student, when you teach him in the class, for example, you don't know at the exam if he's going to cheat or not. If that person is willing to take bribes or be corrupted, that's not your job. You did your job. You trained them to how to fight, how to shoot, or how to monitor activities. You did your job, but it's up to them to sustain that. That's the problem, that it wasn't included. It's sustainability of training. And that's something that should be addressed in the future for policymakers.
Well, let me start with the airport issue. And as far as I'm concerned, you have a few airports in Mali for sure. But as far as the terrorists and traffickers, what we are talking about, even if there's no airport, they can create one for you overnight. If you give them money, you are not going to have a standard tab or whatever, but they will create one for you. But we are not talking about regular airport at all. Yes, let them know, send the money ahead of time, they will create one for you. Okay. Now, as far as Algeria, to me, I've always been also kind of baffled by Algeria's position. And when you go back into history, Algeria's position vis-à-vis France, Algeria's willingness to control, terrorism as a foreign policy tool, which is how this whole thing started. So one has to go back and think about, how do you let go that tool that you have in your hand? Okay, and some African countries also are using terrorism, because when you say terrorism, the West is going to flock in, come and give you money. You can even declare your opposition member terrorist for that matter. So it's a very tricky kind of issue going there. Now, for the training, I think to me that's a very good indication for lacking history or culture. Because if you know already how Tuareg culture, how they operate, importance of clan, if you train some brigade and put some Tuareg in charge of those brigades, hoping you are really resolving the problem, you are just dreaming, which we are all allowed to have. It was just a dream the US was having. Because in fact, 3 out of the 4 brigades, they just defected with equipment and knowledge, everything, and joined the other side. So I hope there are some lessons for decision makers to take out of this. We got to be careful when we go in anywhere. It's not just you teaching and cheating or not cheating. Sometimes there are some indication of students who are going to teach, who cheat rather, and I've done teaching for a while and I know how that goes. So we need to be careful. We can't just go and throw money at something because that's what the government wants us to do. We need to use our brain. Is that feasible? Is that smart? We can't talk about smart foreign policy while we make smart, kind of dumb decisions.
Yes, I would like to add a little point regarding the training. I agree with my colleague here, what he said. I would add the small point saying that AQIM and Ansar Din, these people are battle trained. They fought in Algeria, they fought in Libya during civil war in Libya in 2011, so on. It's not the case of the Malian army, so I would add also that factor. They were well trained, they fought, that experience of fighting, of battle, and they were very well armed. I think that's also a factor I would add to that issue. Thank you.
Thanks. I've seen many hands. I think we'll start over here, please. Yeah, sir.
Lawrence Freeman, the Africa desk at EIR Journal. If you're going to fight terrorism and look at the instability in the region, why are we not identifying the Qataris and the Saudis? You have the whole Wahhabi movement, and I believe the AQIM, its original name was the Salafist Preaching and Combat Association. These 2 countries in spreading, they set these people in motion. These are people involved in the 2011 attack here in 2001, in the attack on our ambassador in Libya in 2012. They have some of them have very close relationships with the British. And if we don't identify these networks, a military operation is not going to succeed. Why, if you're going to dry up terrorism, why don't we go after the heart of terrorism? And I think that raises very interesting questions, and they were not brought up today. One minor question is that at a forum at the Atlantic Council last Friday, one of the speakers alleged that the troops coming down from the north were not going to take Bamako because some of them had very strong relations with people in Bamako on illicit trading and trafficking, and that they alleged that they were not going to move in that direction. I'd like to know what people think about that as well.
Thanks. Sir, I believe you had a question right here. Yeah.
Thank you. I am Álvaro Ortega from the Embassy of Spain. And I would like very much to know if there is an assessment on the current negotiation process that is taking place outside Mali or inside Mali, and the actors, the main actors that are participating in it, not only the Tuareg or MNLA, but also perhaps some factions that have split from Ansar Din, and what would be your assessment on the perspective of this process? And a very short one, if I may also, regarding trafficking, I would very much also have assessment on the role that strong countries like Morocco or Algeria are to play in this trafficking, in the control of this trafficking, or if there is an influence by their side in order to track down this traffic. Thank you.
Let's have one more question here in the front, and then we'll go to our panelists.
I am General Godwin George Moore, retired. I represent the ACSS Nigerian chapter. First, I want to thank the organizers of this for giving us this opportunity to be part of it. I had a very short notice of it, and I made sure that I would like to attend to listen to these very rich discussions I've had this morning. Let me start by saying that France is not alone in the war of northern Mali. Following the UN resolution authorizing the African Union as well as the ECOWAS, the Economic Community for West African States, to deploy troops to aid France in fighting that battle, Nigeria immediately also deployed some troops, including our Air Force. So the issue of always saying that France is doing that, without also recognizing the other components in this operation might not be at the tail end in the interest of France. Mr. Lounnas really captured the essence of it by saying that this war was not going to be the short tea party that France is thinking about. And it's right. So if France envisages that it will finish this war within 3 months, so what stops the Islamic fundamentalists from coming back to occupy the land? It is the responsibility of the ECOWAS force, that is the ECOMOG force on ground now, that will actually ensure that that does not happen. And that is the essence of also acknowledging the contributions of those who are fighting this war alongside with France. And I also want to add that on the issue of the trafficking, this is very true. The interest of the West African sub-region to which Mali belongs, is also key in urging us, that is urging the West African states to also join this war. Because eventually, if we do not do so, and France leaves, then of course the backlash on us will be too much. And that's why we feel that in discussing issues of this nature, we must also take care of all the interests of the participating in their countries. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thanks so much. So let's have a response to these questions from our, some about the international networks involved, some of the role of the troops going south toward Bamako and the traffickers there, the questions about negotiations that are going on and trafficking connections, as well as the African forces that are involved in the fighting now. Let's go again, please.
Okay, regarding Salafism and the spread of religion, what I can say is that it's true the Saudis and Qatari are financing to a large extent religious communities that spread Salafism in the region, and it didn't start yesterday or like in the last 10 years. Started like a long time ago, after the Iranian Revolution. It was to counter the Iranian Revolution. The Saudis started to finance Salafist Islam in the Arab world. Regarding the region, the Sahel, when I was in Mauritania, I noticed that there was a lot of schools, Salafi schools, mosques and so on, financed by Saudis, and where Salafism was taught. Now, a little bit in Bamako, What I can say is that Salafism, you remember one thing, that's one thing we need to know. We don't have time to talk about it in this conference, I guess. But Salafism, there are different types of Salafism. Okay, you have conservative Salafism, and radical Salafism, jihadist Salafism. Salafism spread to a movement called the Tabligh. Tabligh in Arabic means propagation. Comment tu traduis ça? How do you translate this? Preaching. It's preaching. Tabligh. It was a movement called Tabligh, financed by the Qatari and Saudis in the region. It attracted a lot of people in Nouakchott, in Mauritania, a little bit more in Mali. But the Salafi radicals are recruited among these people that goes to the school, but remain like a small minority. But it's true that Saudi and Qatar played a major role. I would just try to answer your question regarding the Ansar Din negotiations. That's, as far as I know, and I talked to a couple of people last week, Ansar Din, like I said, there was the group of people that negotiated in Algiers an agreement with Bamako under the supervision of Algiers. Igad Ali denounced this agreement, and there was a split within Ansar Din. Those who signed the agreement decided to split from Ansar Din and to create the Islamic movement of Azawad. Now, according to the people I talked to, those who decided to split from Ansar Din have little control on the troops on the ground. Okay, those I talked to call them opportunists. Opportunists in English. Okay, they were opportunists and have little control of the troops on the ground. And many wonder, like the people I talked to, wonder what's going to be the impact, right? At least on the short term of the split. Maybe on the long run, but on the short term, I question even myself. I very much doubt that will have any impact. Again, like I said, when I was in Mali, the people I talked to, whatever, like Malian officials, former Targis, rebels, or whatever, have this kind of respect, especially among the Targi population. They have this kind of respect toward Igad Ali. Like I said, he was a hero of the 1990s revolutions. And even if many disagreed with him or were his enemies, they respect him. And I guess among the population, he's still somehow popular. That's all I can say about Ansar Din.
To start, I will talk about the rumors about drug trafficking or deal that was going on simultaneously with Ansar Din going south. I heard that, and I was there on Friday, and I can tell you right now it's a bluff. There was nothing happening, because if he was talking about the High Islamic Council, Mr. Diko, like negotiating with Ansar Din, that was back like few weeks or a month before Ansar Din started going south. When he was going to Douenza and Timbuktu to negotiate with Iyad Ghali, try to bring him to reason, just to separate himself and from AQAM. I think he got that confused probably about negotiating going at the same time where Ansar Din decided to go south. So I haven't seen any indications whatsoever from any open source or from locals who are there to tell you that actually Mr. Diko was in Douenza or Gao or Timbuktu. So that's my take on that. As for negotiations, Algeria tried to negotiate with Ansar Din, who are mainly made of the Ifrane. And let's clarify something that who we're negotiating with mostly, it was Intalla, Agatar, who's soon to be the chief of the Ifrane tribe in Kidal region. So he was, that's my analysis, that he was more interested in keeping his family in power of the over the Ifrane tribe rather than following the same ideology of Iyad Ghali. So now they separated themselves from Iyad Ghali after it was clearly that he doesn't want to separate himself from AQAM, so to have some legitimacy for negotiations. We don't know yet. The Malian government still rejecting to negotiate with the Intalla. So that's about Ansar Din. As for the MNLA, for now, the Malian government said they're willing to negotiate with them. Really ready to sit down. The MNLA, same thing, and they're ready to collaborate with French forces, share intelligence, and help them on the ground. But they need their materials or resources. That's been their demand for a long time. we need resources, we will fight AQIM, we will fight extremist groups, but they don't have resources to do that. I think this weekend, there were reports that they arrested 2 extremists. They arrested one member of Mujwa and one member of Ansar Din, who was in charge of the Islamic police in Timbuktu. They arrested them on the border with Algeria in Khalil. We don't know, it hasn't been confirmed yet because we haven't seen actually pictures or videos that actually they've been arrested. They're trying to prove themselves, so they will make themselves legitimate to negotiate, and they have a good intention. Big question is, the MNLA has the issue with being accepted by the Mali people, because Mali people now accusing the MNLA of being behind all this chaos. So that's the big issue to address. As we're talking about trafficking between Morocco and Algeria, the borders has been tight between Morocco and Algeria in the last 10 years because of the Algeria-Moroccan not conflicts, but just they just seem not to be on the same page when it comes to politics about Western Sahara. So the borders are tight between Morocco and Algeria. That's why actually illicit trafficking has moved from that region to more towards like West Mauritania, East Mauritania, and west of Mali. Take that route going through Tawadini, Tessalit, all the way to Sabha in Libya and to Egypt. So there is not much trafficking happening through the Moroccan-Algerian border. There is, but at some extent, it's not as it used to be.
Yes, let me just, in terms of Qatari and Saudi networks, I believe that we know very well. We have identified them. It's not that we have not. The question whether what do we want to do about that? Because remember, they were heavily involved in Libya, and we praise them. So, hello. So I think that's what the issue is right there. Now, as far as my friend from Spain, the embassy, as my colleagues have said, in terms of negotiation to me, from my sources, right now we have a great deal of confusion. Who is talking to whom and why or whatever. It's like a fire in the house. Everybody's trying to salvage whatever they can right now. So I can really, I don't believe any of those things going on. The only thing that I know for sure is Sanogo. Captain Sanogo has sent a team to Ouagadougou to try to negotiate retirement of those coups, those who staged the coup. That's something that I think started yesterday. That much I know for sure, for fact. Otherwise, now, trafficking should be a transnational regional issue. But again, when you go back to national interests, Morocco, Algeria, Mauritania, there seem to be, kind of disagreement on how we should address that issue. And sovereignty and all, when you factor all this in, we are looking at the same movie, but with different idea behind our head. That's really what I think is going on. George, I would like to kind of be with you on ECOWAS, but unfortunately, when I see the record of ECOWAS, while in theory, they really wanted to go and do something. On October 17, there was a meeting in Bamako where they crafted a plan to go in. The reality is, I think Nigeria sent a few folks to go and start helping out. But until the French came in to stop, the movement of these guys coming down, there was nobody. Unfortunately, that's the reality. Now, so in theory, there were steps that they wanted to take, a plan to be taken. But in reality, nothing happened until the French started on January 11 to really go, and now you have folks coming in.
Yeah.
I would like just to add a small thing regarding drug trafficking. I've talked to a friend of mine. She's working on drug trafficking in Morocco and Algeria. And I'm quoting her. She told me that the drug trafficking and the drug lords in Algeria and Morocco could give lessons on regional cooperation to both governments. I mean, they do not recognize the closing of the borders, and there's a lot of trafficking in both regions. I mean, it's true that the borders are closed, but regarding drug smuggling, I mean, it's going on every day. And apparently, according to her, there's a lot of drug trafficking. They cooperate a lot together. It's the only thing I wanted to add.
Thanks very much. We have about 10 minutes left. Let's take a final round. Yes, ma'am, right here.
Hi, Britt Sloan from USIP. Dr. Nipo, you mentioned the importance of a political solution to this problem. I'm wondering what you think that might look like. Does it include elections? Does it include a national conference process? What might that look like to you and to the other panelists as well?
Thanks. Yes, sir. Yeah. please. Just a microphone first, please. If you could introduce yourself, please.
Malik Chaka, Millennium Challenge Corporation. My question goes back to the gentleman on my left who contrasted the approach of the Malians to the Tuareg problem with that of the Nigerian. Could he expand on that? And a second brief question has to do with how much is the capacity of the Salafists diminished by the French offensive in terms of casualties, fatalities, in terms of oil, and in terms of rolling stock, four-wheel drive vehicles?
Thank you. Yeah, sir.
Max Kelly, Booz Allen Hamilton. Question about, given the political weakness and disorganization of the Malian state right now, and given what we've heard for the foreseeable future, how deeply involved or directly involved does the international community have to be, both in the negotiations and then in the implementation of any accord?
Thanks very much. I think we'll come back to our panelists. We're running a little bit short on time, so we'll have our, I think, what will be our final responses. Please, Djallil.
I'll just answer on the Salafist casualties. I mean, if you're talking about the troops, I mean, how many people from QIM, Ansar ad-Din, and is this what you're referring to? Were killed, right? That's what you're referring to, right? We don't have real figures right now. I mean, apparently there are a lot of them have been killed, but how many we don't know yet. What we know is that a lot of people from QIM, most of the QIM leaders, brigades, troops, and so on, and the same for Ansar ad-Din, retreated to the Afogas region on the border of Algeria, and we don't know yet exactly how many. Like, it's true that they lost a lot of men, they lost a lot of like transportation trucks and so on. But how does that affect the ability to move around or to fight? Like I said, I doubt that on the short term it affects greatly their ability. I mean, they've retreated. We have to wait. It's too soon to know for the timing, from my point of view. That's all I would say.
Quickly to add to that, yes, there've been damages, and now they're just scattered everywhere, and that's what they want. They just want to take it outside of the cities. They don't want it because they're easy targets when they are in the city. They are something to keep in mind, and Djallil mentioned it earlier. They are very, very patient. They will sit there and wait, sleep, whatever they want to do. They will let you forget until they catch you by surprise. They're very patient. Closing the borders with neighboring countries will not stop them from trafficking, from transportation and such. They will go back to old school, using donkeys and camels, and using alternative routes. So how much effect closing the borders will affect the Salafists? It will not affect them a short term, but maybe a long term, as they keep running out of stuff and thinking of ways to keep resources coming. Negotiations, international community involvements, other than neighboring countries being involved, Burkina Faso, Algeria, Mauritania, not as much. Switzerland is working with the MNLA. That's the only thing I'm aware of. They're working with them to develop a proposed federal state of Northern Mali. They're working on that in Nouakchott. They've been working on it earlier in January and in December. But now there is more to it because the MNLA right now talking to the Islamic group of the Azawad, the Islamic State of the Azawad by Al-Ghabas Agintala. So how legitimate also they will be and how they're going to frame themselves to allow the international community to trust them that actually Al-Ghabas Agintala totally separates himself from Iyad al-Ghali. That's my take, and I will let Mr. Hanging Food talk.
Thank you very much. What I was talking about in terms of political solution, clearly given what is going on and how far back those grievances go, you simply cannot have an interim institution address those issues. You need to really go back. That's what I'm calling for some, the got to be election, legislative and presidential election, But even before that, the Malian political class need to come together because there were folks within that class who were supporting MNLA and other groups. So you can't have that and really expect any kind of genuine conclusion of this issue. So they really have to me, it's a political solution first before we go into development and others, because we are talking about allocation of resources and all those things, and you need to have those who are, legitimately elected to kind of make those decisions. That's what I'm talking about, political solution before anything else. Mali and Niger, it's kind of funny because when you go back to June 1990, the first, or one of the Tuareg attack was on a police station at the border of Tizawa 10, border of Niger and Mali. And the Tuareg of Mali were trying to kind of liberate some of the Nigerian Tuareg who were held in the prison. So, but what happened here is, Niger, instead of continuing branding or calling everybody, going through that kind of amalgamation, everybody terrorists, Niger, to me, managed somehow to distinguish who are the true, who are those who are calling or asking for change, those genuine grievances, as opposed to bundling everybody, calling them bandits. That's what they used to call them, the bandit army. And eventually, they figured out a portion of these guys who genuinely were, posing some of the concern they have. And when the government start addressing them one by one, before you realize those who are now, used to be with the group overall are now with the government. The prime minister right now of Niger is a Tuareg who used to be on the other side. So you have some movement going on, some road being, built, some kind of development program coming into Niger. So the Tuareg, quote unquote, have no more reason. There's no reason to continue bickering or fighting if you see progress in whatever your grievances are. Now, in terms of direct intervention of the West, to me, we are talking about a transnational issue here, threat. That's what Mali has become because of all what you heard this morning. Therefore, it seems to me that the West needs to be involved. How direct or indirect, I don't know, but the West needs to be involved. But the West cannot be involved with a different agenda going. That's the problem. And which goes back to national interest. We all have a different interest going, pretending we are playing the same game, but I have my role, you have your role, we might never score. So it seems to me there got to be some meeting where the West somehow need to have a common agenda, at least going into Mali. Otherwise, it is likely that we are not going to be successful. We might have a short-term solution. The French will come or West African will come and chase out the Tuareg or the rebels, quote unquote. But just a matter of time, they'll be back.
Something very quick about the elections. It's difficult to hold any elections right now since you have hundreds of thousands of Malians that are in refugee camps. So it would be really challenging and difficult to count who's Malian and who's not. And so for the short term, it's going to be really difficult.
Yes, I just would like to add something to what my friend Rida said earlier about the cities. Why also it's not a problem for people like AQIM to retreat from the cities and to withdraw and to run away. I'm just going to culture this former jihadist I talked to. At some point, I asked him, what's the point of today doing the jihad and all that? I mean, Al-Qaeda is gone and so on. And he was like, he quoted this verses of Quran, I think, where it says how many times a small group of people won against the greater army, okay? They have this lecture of the events. Losing a battle is no problem. They perceive it as when the Prophet lost the battle of Uhud, but he ended up winning the final war against the Quraysh in Saudi Arabia back then, okay? So for them, again, it's no problem. Like you said, they're very patient. They think time is on their side. Everything happens according to the Quran. They'll read the Quran, they look at the events, the things are analyzed. We lost today, it's no problem. It happens in the past, and the Prophet ended up winning the war. It's the same, it's going to happen. We're 20, 30, 40 people, so what? The Prophet won the battle at Uhud. He was 70, I think, group of 70 fighters who won against 500 fighters. He did it. If he did it back at the time, we can do it. There's this kind of gestuelle they're repeating in their perception. Again, they live in closed environments, the closing of environments, and they repeat all the time the same stories. They tell themselves the same stories all the time. That's all I wanted to ask.
Thanks very much. We've reached the end of our time. We had many more hands than we were able to get to. I think that's a sign of the interest and importance of the panel and also the quality of the panelists. We've had a chance to look at the armed groups. We've looked at the trafficking. We looked at some of the deep underlying causes, and we've already started going towards some of the solutions, which will be our focus next. So I think this panel has really served to show that the forces of instability are deep-rooted, they're complex, and they're multifaceted, and that responses by implication will need to be subtle, flexible, and long-term. Our next panel will take up these responses by looking at priorities for stabilizing northern Mali. We're going to now take a break for 15 minutes, and I ask that everyone return to his or her seat at 10:30 sharp so that we can have as much time as possible for our next session. But before we break, please join me in thanking our panelists once more.